This episode was made possible by my generous supporters on Patreon. Welcome to my new patrons this week: BLAA6, Talix, David Van Mill, Emily Pendergraft, Brian Martin, Brady Eggert, Commander 672, Greg Shash, Shannis, Arnmens, and Hawk Hero. Guess what? I screwed up by forgetting to record this part. Seems to be a running theme in this video.
Also, I may have forgotten Gene the Blue back when he first became a patron, and I just need to make up for that now. And yes, I did find time to record this later on, but now all of the editing has been queued up, and this episode's running late already, and oh jeepers. Hey guys, so after that surprisingly sobering top 5 last week, I thought for my last video before the new season, I'd do something a bit more lighthearted, and something I've always loved seeing other creators do. Admit when they've messed up, especially after all the lessons I've learned from the past season, as well as all the unintentional lessons I learned from when they screwed up. It seems appropriate that I end the season ruminating on my own failings and trying to better myself through acknowledging them. But in a fun way, you know? These are Suede's top 14 screw-ups of Pokémon Season 1. Why 14? Well, because I actually wrote 15, but then I realized one of them wasn't a mistake and I couldn't find another one in time. Yes, it's 14 instead of 15. Because I screwed up. How on message is that? Quick disclaimers out of the way. Obviously, this is not a comprehensive list of the mistakes I made. An 80-episode series with only 14 mistakes is like a Meowth who speaks. Very rare. I'm also not including minor editing or formatting glitches like leaving the background up for the thoughts card in episode 74, or accidentally putting the script help subtitle too early in episode 80, or getting the time codes wrong. I'll leave that to the wiki if I ever get big enough for one, and besides, a YouTube show without minor editing mistakes is like a Meowth with a clone. Even rarer. These are just the ones that stood out so much I had to write them down, and they consist of both subjective mistakes, like missed joke opportunities, and objective mistakes, like getting facts wrong. I'm sure many more will also be pointed out in the description, so look down there if the one you noticed is missing. Let's go. Number 14, from Charmander, the stray Pokemon. Giving it a B. This was one of the best episodes in the whole series, with awesome gags and the best executed deep moral I've seen in years, and the only reason I didn't give it the equivalent of a Master Ball is just because Damien appeared out of nowhere at the end. The only explanation I can give is that I was still trying to figure out my criteria for the grading system, but not giving it a Master Ball was just dumb. It's a near perfect episode brought down by an imperfect human being. Yes, I know this is much more of a subjective screw up and almost a humble brag, but that's why it's number 14. Number 13, from Bulbasaur's Mysterious Garden, missing the point and the pun. I feel like this one was one of my weaker episodes, though I am proud of my Evil Dead gag here.
Sure, what's the worst that could happen to a guy named Ash in a possessed forest?
But I felt like I didn't do a very good job of explaining the show's moral, mainly because the show didn't do a very good job of it either. At the time of review, I thought it was a heartwarming message about how it was okay to wait for major milestones in your life if you weren't ready, but looking at it again, the way that I put it made it sound like it was more like, don't ever grow up, kids, which was definitely not my intention. On top of this, that message got confused in the actual episode too. Ash did say that Bulbasaur should evolve when he's ready, but again, this message is confused when the other Saurs only accept him when he acts in a way that they deem a substitute for evolving, in this case how strong he is, rather than accepting his own rate of growth. Sure, you can grow at your own pace, as long as you can keep up with us. I'm not saying that was their intention, but both how they portray it and how I tried to explain it was just overly messy in my eyes. My apologies if it wasn't very satisfying on your end. There's also the fact that I didn't mention that once again, Bulbasaur was in peril due to Team Rocket's vacuum cleaner, and that the episode's title was actually a pun on Bulbasaur's Japanese name, Fushikitane, which can literally mean both Isn't It Weird and Mysterious Bulb. In turn, Ivysaur's Japanese name means Mysterious Grass, and Venusaur's means Mysterious Flower, so Mysterious Garden was a great shout out to that. It's just a dumb missed opportunity for a cool bit of trivia. Number 12, from Wake Up Snorlax, not mentioning Snorlium Z. I admit this is probably a byproduct of me not really getting into Sun and Moon as much as many other people did, but not mentioning that the hippie's mystic crystal looks just like Snorlium Z, whether in a joke or in the trivia, was a big oversight. I could have discussed whether it was intentional or talked about how much the devs knew about the show, but nope. Because I slept on Sun and Moon, Snorlax slept on me, and that's never a good thing. Number 11, from Tentacool and Tentacruel. Not noticing Nastina's Paradise bears a passing resemblance to the Aether Foundation headquarters. Look, I got into Sun and Moon late, okay? I know now it would have been a great parallel, as it's a place portrayed as a paradise run by a woman who originally claims to be benevolent but turns out not to be all that nice. I missed out on a cool and topical reference, all because I wasn't up to date on getting the latest game. Again. My only defense is that I wasn't in as comfortable a situation financially then as I am now, so we had to wait. Not only to afford it, but also for the US cart to get shipped over for my region-locked US 3DS. Why do I have a US 3DS? Because in New Zealand it was over $100 freaking bucks. Capitalism and border control made me miss a joke. So there. Number 10, from Who Gets to Keep Togepi. What was up with Misty knocking the others out of the way to grab Togepi? This one's less of a a missed gag and more of a missed rant opportunity. In all the hubbub of this already crowded episode, I completely spaced on the fact that Misty, who has had literally nothing to do with Togepi up to this point, just barges in and takes the imprinting trophy. How could I have missed how out of nowhere this was? Ash found it, Brock took care of it, Misty did absolute zip, and she still feels like she should get first dibs on holding the newborn, going so far as to physically inhibit the others from doing so. This is worse than when Ash randomly got a Charmander that Brock had every right to be emotionally invested in. Jeez, Brock, no wonder you have intimacy issues. Everything you develop an emotional connection to gets taken away from you, even your freaking parents. At least you've got Vulpix, for now. Oh, and I also did miss out on a blindingly obvious gag here.
Let me see!
Number 9, from Princess vs. Princess. Brock shouldn't have known Misty had sisters. Nice and simple here. My personal favorite kind of gags are brick jokes and callbacks, and I could have made a doozy here.
When you're the youngest of 4 sisters, having something that belongs to only you is important.
Wait, you have sisters? Yep, Brock shouldn't actually know that Misty has siblings at this point, as he was off doing his stuff during the whole Cerulean Gym episodes. I have to mention it as I was kicking myself later when I realized, though there is one minor meme in the Pokemon community regarding this episode that I also missed. The building with the letters PMS written clearly across it in an episode about girls. To be honest, although it's quite a coincidence, I'm assuming, I'm not sure how I could have worked it in other than just saying, hey, look at that. Weird. Number 8, from Pokemon Paparazzi. Todd doesn't mean death. Okay, now we're getting into the stuff that really makes me look like an idiot. For a cheap gag, I noticed that Todd Snap's name would be Death Snap in German, when, as all who could sprechen Sie Deutsch in the comments kindly reminded me, it really wasn't. For one thing, Todd, the German word for death, is pronounced pretty differently, and for another thing, the German word for snap is schnappen, and it really doesn't work. And on top of that, the actual translation for Death Snap is actually Todesschnappschuss, based on Google Translate, which sounds like one of those hybrid dinosaurs from Jurassic World. Sure, this would have flown under most viewers' radar, but I freaking made the joke to appeal to those who knew some German, and on that I failed miserably. Ich entschuldige mich. Number 7, from the case of the Canine Caper. There was actually a reason for Jigglypuff's song not working. Moving on to a more plot-related screw-up, in this episode where we see like 20 Growlithe and not a single flamethrower, I made this observation.
But wait, why didn't they fall asleep? It's one of the longest running gags in the show that whoever hears Jigglypuff's song falls asleep.
It was pointed out to me that the helium gas caused Jigglypuff's voice to change, which is why the song didn't work. Fair enough, I guess I should have noticed that, but 2 points in my defense. 1, they really could have got that across a lot better. Jigglypuff didn't look like she was concerned about her voice, she just looked awkward. And 2, her voice really doesn't sound that different. I mean, granted, a regular voice already sounds like it's sucking helium, but can you really tell the difference side by side? However, I did imply that there was no explanation as to why the song didn't work, and there was, even if it did raise some further questions. My bad. Oh, and also from that same episode...
On a side note here, I was always taught that it was rude to place your chopsticks over the bowl like that. Was I taught wrong, or is Ash just being rude?
So, I wanted to kind of strike a conversational tone here, but I feel it was really dumb of me to ask that kind of question when the answer was literally just a Google away. No, putting the chopsticks over the bowl like that isn't rude, it just means you're completely done. Just like I'm completely done with asking banal, easy-to-research questions. Number 6, from Beach Blanket Blastoise. The obscure Beach Blanket Bingo isn't. This one's nice and quick. Apparently the 1965 Frankie Avalon vehicle isn't obscure at all, at least within the genre, and is in fact pretty much the go-to example film for the 1960s no-plot beach movie craze, much like High Noon or Rio Bravo is for 50s westerns. This was my fault for considering beach movies as much of a cult niche in the US as it is in New Zealand, when I really should have known better. Number 5, from Master the Unexpected. Prairie oysters. Okay, so there's a little bit to unpack here. I got some confused comments when I made this joke, one of the more crude ones I've made on the show.
What was wrong with saying Taurus balls? Wait, that sounds more like prairie oysters. Taurus kebabs then.
So apparently a prairie oyster is actually a cocktail, traditionally consisting of a raw egg, Worcestershire sauce, tomato juice, vinegar, hot sauce, salt, and ground black pepper. That sounds like chucking down a diner's garbage can, I'm not gonna lie, but it is a real thing, and hearing it in reference to Tauros probably would be confusing. What was actually in my mind was a Rocky Mountain oyster, which is deep-fried bull's testicles, and now the joke is fully explained and totally ruined. It gets weirder though, the joke actually went over fine in certain northern lands, as prairie oyster actually does have the same meaning as Rocky Mountain oyster in some regions of Canada. Unfortunately, most of my viewers live in the US, and the reference went over their heads and across the border. Rocky Mountain also suited the episode's location way better, so sorry guys. Number 4, from Holy Matrimony. I fail as a fan. I, as to be expected of any reasonably nerdy 13 to 17-year-old, engaged in the practice of shipping or pairing my favorite characters for many of the shows and books I was involved in. And almost without fail, I chose the most boring ones that weren't quite the obvious pairing. Ash Misty was an exception to that, but there was also Harry Hermione, Cloud Tifa, Matt Sora, Kairi Sora, Naruto Hinata, AJ Rainbow Dash. Wait, this is getting too recent. Yes, just the most plain vanilla, half-expected pairings for me, mainly due to the fact that to me it was more exciting when there was actually half a chance of it happening, but you do you, palette shippers. However, there was one pairing that at the time I thought was so bland and predictable that even I couldn't touch it, and that was rocket shipping, the pairing of Jesse and James. It was just so obvious to me due to their rock-solid dynamic and my lack of understanding of his camp coding. I'm not saying he isn't queer, it just never crossed my mind as an oblivious kid. The idea of the pairing had no spice at all, even to a mayonnaise sandwich shipper like me. So, ironically because of that, I looked over what many considered to be the moment they latched onto Team Rocket as a ship, the moment at the end of the episode.
James, make it double.
Double trouble time, right?
Sounds great to me, James.
I agree that it is a pretty romantic moment, but again, in my mind, the pairing was just so obvious that this wasn't anything special. It was like Brock going gaga over a girl. However, as many pointed out in the comments, this was the moment for many where the ship set sail, and I feel bad for not at least paying lip service. To be honest though, what really cemented them as a couple for a while in my case was this moment in Pokémon Chronicles. But who knows. Number 3, from Showdown at the Poke Corral. Look, just roll the clip.
As far as I know, this is the last time the show itself acknowledges any event that happens in the movies.
This was irresponsible and boneheaded, and I have absolutely no idea why I wrote it, let alone recorded it and edited it. Especially since a lot of my viewer base knew me from reviewing the freaking movies. You'd think I put a little more research into how they were referenced in the show. So yes, in case you haven't guessed yet, that statement wasn't just off a little, it was flat out wrong. Here are some examples of its direct contradiction kindly provided in the comments. In one episode of the Johto League, which I freaking remember watching, we see a baby Lugia, which is of course its own can of worms, but anyway, Ash remarks that he saw a Lugia while he was in the Orange Islands. In Diamond and Pearl, when the gang meet Maylene, Lucario's aura abilities are shown, and it's brought up that Ash has an affinity for using aura too. This is a reference to the Lucario movie. Also, Dawn buys a Luna Wing in the Darkrai movie, and we see it again in the show. And in Best Wishes, N watches the 6th Genesects that appeared in the 16th movie escape from a Team Plasma lab. It was an easily preventable slip-up with no excuses on my end. Also, I should have remembered this little detail.
I'm not surprised you showed up late. I'm surprised you showed up at all.
You have a freaking car! Number 2, from Ditto's Mysterious Mansion, rating it a dark ball. Oh boy, this freaking episode. There was so much I had to explain about my decision to give this one an F, what would now be called a dark ball, that stemmed from poor communication and also some misunderstandings regarding the plot. First of all, an F/dark ball rating does not ever automatically mean it was a bad episode to begin with. It could even be a decent episode in its own right, which I believe this episode was. But the idea that using violent intimidation tactics can be just the trick to finally get someone to be normal, it hit me hard, especially as someone with ASD myself, so I think I overreacted a little. There are some people who can force themselves to be normal for extended periods of time without any adverse mental health effect, but it needs to be done on an extreme case-by-case basis, otherwise it can have seriously traumatic effects on your mental health. Now, my thoughts on that message being harmful are unchanged, but some people reached out to me sincerely about 3 elements I had failed to take into account, and they felt the result of that was that I came across as insensitive. So let's look at them. Firstly, they pointed out that at the end, Duplica didn't know that Ditto was intimidated into changing. For all she knew, Team Rocket just stumbled onto a technique that she didn't consider, which, okay, describes exactly what happened, but I'm guessing she wouldn't have approved of their methods had she known, and she never finds out. Granted, she also never presses them for how they did it, but at the very least, we can't say they were rewarded for their behavior. Heck, they got blasted off for their crimes. They just happened to be thanked for something they did with the thankful party not knowing the gory details, and though that is still shady, it's an important distinction to make. I also got some flack for using the word abusive, which I admit was overkill and insensitive to those who have suffered or indeed still suffer from real emotional or physical abuse. The term abuse is usually reserved for sustained and especially repeated cruelty, and one instance of what was probably an idle threat doesn't quite measure up to that standard. If they'd threatened to kill Ditto, it'd be a different story entirely, but I really should have used the word intimidation rather than abuse. It's still very bad, to be clear, but it doesn't quite carry the same baggage. Lastly, and I think think most importantly, I believe the final word on whether an episode should receive a dark ball should be based on intention. For example, yes, Jinx looks like a black stereotype, but I didn't give it a dark ball because I'm 99% sure it was not the writer's intention to offend African Americans, and they did their best to correct it. Yes, Kaiser promotes poor gun safety, but the intention of that story was not to say, look how guns solve all your problems. It was, holy crap, Kaiser is insane! But the intention of Path to the Pokémon League was to show that AJ shouldn't have been questioned and that Ash was being a jerk for expressing concern. And Beauty and the Beach did explicitly frame the objectification of minors as benign, or at worst a little creepy. That's what corrupted any good points the episodes had for me. I say more on both of these in the previous video. But in this episode, was the implication potentially harmful? Yes. Was it intentional? I don't think so. But at the same time, I still think the writers should have known better. Ultimately though, the episode doesn't frame Team Rocket as good guys, and it definitely doesn't come across as, you should do what Team Rocket did. I stand by my statements regarding the unfortunate message that comes across, but for using insensitive wording and failing to take the intentions of the author into account, I apologize and give the episode its pre-Dark Ball rating of a Great Ball. It's still not cut and dry, it's just very fuzzy. Oh, and why I didn't use this joke that was handed to me on a silver platter, I'll never know.
That Ditto's powers are unbeatable.
Pika! Better than the real Pokemon!
And number 1, not crediting M. Cypher. Nearest to the end of the Pokemon journey, in episode 71, I decided to take a couple of steps to prevent my videos from getting taken down quite so often. Ha! So I switched to a slightly different aesthetic by putting a border around the video and throwing some appropriate expressions in there from my avatar that I commissioned from prolific Transformers artist and Isle of Rangoon star M. Cypher for my Pokemon Forever review. Though I credited him for his work in that review, I did not for any of the journey episodes all the way up until the end. Crediting your artists is a basic decency, and because I got caught up in production, I failed to do an insanely simple thing and just write an extra line in the credits thanking the guy who didn't do much, you know, just created my online persona as everyone on the internet sees it. Then I forgot again. And again. For 9 episodes, not to mention for every single title card, I didn't do the decent thing, and I'm absolutely ashamed of this. I'm going to go through and credit him in every single video from now on and put a link in every single episode description to his work, but because of how prolific it was and how simple it would have been to fix, this remains my greatest screw-up so far. M. Cypher, if you're watching, I'm sorry, man. Luckily, if Pokemon has taught me anything this year, it's been that you can learn from your mistakes and try to do better. Hey guys, quick reminder, these are my transitional videos between seasons, so I'm using the opportunity to take a holiday of sorts from the Bulbapedia and Patreon skits. Don't worry, they'll be back in the Orange League. That out of the way, Bulbapedia is a fantastic website for finding Pokemon information, and Dokusu's Backpack in particular is an insanely useful resource for comparing the Japanese and English versions. And here are the people without whom the show wouldn't exist. All of these people get my humble gratitude for allowing me to work on these videos full-time and support my family, but some gave a little bit more to be mentioned and get some sweet art, and here they are. John, Joelle Young, P.O.B., Joel Schooler, Gray Morality, Alison Bennett, Jonathan Powell, Matt Storrs, Goose Wrightsupos, Calvin Atkinson, Carton Kitsune, Christian Larson, Mitchell Hinkelman, Colleen, Wesley Fox, Ginkgo, Daniel Waldron, Lucas Newmeyer, The Dumb Smith, Colin Ryder McRae, Deep Cover, Thomas Hogan, Giseki77, Brandon A. Hall, Dylan Lewis, Wandering Poem, and Henry H. And then there are those who paid for the bigger art, which are Trey McGowan with this sweet rooster biker, Mark Dean with this Yu-Gi-Oh! Persona, Grant Gangle as a lich, Colleen French in the world's awesomest wheelchair, Loomsy96 as a Power Ranger, Ticking 101 with a straw hat that he should probably give back, Ryan Griffin as Marty McFly, Andrew Welsh as a guy just sitting down and reading a book, good for him, Zachary Taylor as the former president of the United States with which he shares a name, Super Bunny Bun as a cute little superhero bunny, Stephen Walker as a brooding man in a trench coat, the Dark Master as a shiny Charizard trainer, James Nicholson as a Delmi specialist, I really should check that Pokemon out, Wheels as a very dangerous hazard sign, and Jonathan Johnson who commissioned a Greninja on a Solgaleo dual-wielding double-8. Dang. There's also Cameron McLeod, Joe, Sean Ryan, Adam One-Eye, Evan Bow, Oliver, Carl Brackman, Joseph Strimling, Fusionator, Frankly I'm a Person, Death Animated, William L. Reese, Ian Curtis Charles, Winters King, and Jason Higgins, who haven't gotten their art yet, but they will eventually. Well, now that I've been sufficiently humbled, I think it's about time to rejoin Ash and see if he's been sufficiently humbled. I'm not holding out much hope, though.